Well, hello, everyone. This is the Journey of Integral Recovery. And Doug, what episode is this we're recording?
This is episode 22.
22. Go figure. Anyway, I'm John Dupuy. This is Doug Prater, our producer and co-podcaster. And this is the handsome guy up in the corner, Dr. Bob Weathers, psychologist, jazz drummer extraordinaire, and all-around amazing Renaissance man.
Thank you.
Here we are, and so far we've covered a bunch of stuff. But basically, my little plan was to get through the integral or the AQUA model, which is an acronym for you guys haven't heard it yet. It stands for all quadrants, all lines, all levels, all states, and all types. So we kind of just touched on that in the preceding shows and episodes, and along with shadow and shame and some of Dr. Bob's story and a lot of stuff. Sometimes we finish a show and we kind of forget what we actually talked about. And it's been interesting because I'm writing my next book, and I'm writing about flow states, and Doug just created this incredible suite of tracks called Stealing Flow, which is a riff off the book Stealing Fire, and it's super flow engendering. And I noticed, I didn't know if I had a brain problem or something, but a lot of interviews and talks or teachings I just do them. The time goes really fast. It feels great. Then I can't remember, what the hell I said or what happened. Then we go back and go, wow, that's pretty good. So I was asking Doug about it and Bob, and it seems that that's one of the qualities of flow states, which we're not talking about now, actually, is that it just like there's no karmic stickiness. It just comes through. It's like when you're playing drums, Bob, when you're in that state, you probably don't remember everything you did unless you go back and listen to it. It's just coming through you. And that's really exciting. And we're going to touch on that in the next episode. However, anyway, guys, I'll shut up. Say hello.
Well, hi, everybody. Episode 22 is just kind of incredible. I'm so glad that we've made it this far and glad that we're through the AQUA model at this point. That's something that's worth listening to and reviewing quite a bit, because we will touch on it and expand on it and continue to go there. That's all kind of critical foundational information for the rest of the stuff that we're going to be covering in this podcast. So glad that you've been with us so far. And if you're just joining us now for the first time, there are definitely some episodes in there on the AQUA model covering all levels, all lines, all quadrants, all states, and all types that are worth going back and reviewing a little bit so that you've got that solid foundation.
Yeah, and a friend of mine said, with the AQUA map, it takes X amount of time to learn, because every time you look at it, it's the universe keeps revealing itself and to the infinity of things. So, so we'll be referring back. But when people ask me what integral recovery is, and the elevator speech is, it's the map plus the practice. Okay, the map illuminates the universe and everything that's necessary that we have to pay attention to and account for in our lives and our practice as individuals and as a collective. And then the practice is where the rubber meets the road when it really comes to the transformation. The map itself is psychoactive. I mean, it will. Just that is life transforming. Once you get that, you just start seeing all this stuff and go, oh, wow. Now I understand. My gosh. But then the practice is where it really gets fun and it really gets transformative and inspiring. So,
one of the...
Let me mention something here real quickly. Excuse me, Doug. Is that there's an online Facebook community connected to this podcast, and something I've really appreciated, including just in the last few days, and Doug, you and John have likely read this, is that, first of all, that community is very practice-oriented, and I love that, is that here the three of us in interaction with, including with a few guests, have elaborated on the model, on the AQUA model, and that's been really valuable. And then there's an online community that's really day by day implementing this in our daily lives. And so I want to recommend our viewers and listeners to check that out. Doug, maybe you can say a word about how people can join in. I just feel like that's a really effective complement to what we're doing right here, just in terms of, like you said, John, putting boots on the ground.
Well, absolutely. The Facebook community, to protect everybody's identities, since recovery is a sensitive topic, we have made it a secret Facebook group. So you can't find it on Facebook through searching. You can, however, find the link if you go to our website at integralrecoveryinstitute.com/community. And there are instructions there on how to join. If you do that, like Bob was saying, it's a really good way to focus on the practice. And as we will get into far more deeply in this episode, the knowledge of the Aqua model is not enough. In the end, it all comes down to practice. Flow states too are not about knowledge. They are about practice. They are about the doing. And so we take this information.
Practice sets you up to be able to do the flow states. It's like, Sam Snead, the great golfer, the guy was interviewing him. He said, Sam, how come you're such a great golfer? He says, I'm just lucky, I guess. He says, man, I've seen you practice more than any human being I've ever noticed. He said, well, the more I practice, the luckier I get, so that's how it kind of works with all these.
I like that.
And so there in our Facebook community, in addition to having great discussions about practice to help inform your own practice, you can also find accountability partners who will help you make sure you're doing your daily practices. And also we are offering coaching on your recovery and your practice. So join us there in the Facebook group and you can get more information about that. Dr. Bob is taking clients right now, and we highly recommend that you come check it out.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, let me just say a little bit about the anonymity thing. All right. It's like, I talk about it in my book, and I hope soon the day will come where, if you are in recovery or you have a problem with drugs and alcohol, you can't use them, or, that you won't have to be anonymous. Okay. Because there's really no shame. I'm not thinking if this was like the journey of integral gay people, would it have to be anonymous? Well, I hope not, And I think, and since I was a kid, there's been a lot of progress. It's not completely gone, sexism and homophobia has not been done away with, but it's a lot better than it was, So I hope someday that, it's not a, put down of anything of Alcoholics Anonymous or all the anonymous programs. I understand it, but it's all of us, we are recovery. It's not, nobody's 2 degrees removed from it. It's our family, it's ourselves, it's our loved ones, it's our colleagues, it's our, compatriots, however you want to do that. And I saw this, John McEnroe. I love that guy. Anyway, there was this grumpy old, a woman, former tennis champion back in the 50s or something. And she got on some rant, like half the women on the tennis pro circuit are all lesbians. That's a disgrace. And John McEnroe did a video, said, if that were true, who gives a fuck? He said those words. And he said, if all of them were lesbians, who gives a fuck, And then he did another one. I forget what the third category. I said, right on, John. Just shut up, you old biddy. It's like, really, who gives a fuck, and it's like God made gay people, so get over yourself, right? And I like that. So that's kind of the way I feel about addiction. Well, who gives a fuck, And I guess the only shame is, the only thing is if you don't take responsibility and get the help you need and turn your life around. But the fact is, the book I'm writing now, that Doug and I are writing, is taking integral recovery and everything we learn for everybody, because we all have issues, except my mother. Okay, a dear. No, but anyway, we all have issues. We all got to work on our stuff, and the same thing we're saying for addicts, people struggling with substance abuse, etc., is true for every person on the planet. And this is our hope, that this idea of practice is going to get out there, and it's going to take over the world, because when we start doing that, we're going to start evolving much more quickly. And our young people who are taught this in school, we're going to be, it took us 50 years to get to, or something like that. They're going to be hitting it at 12 or 13, so it's going to be, the world's going to be a better place for it. So,
John, let me dive in and say something here. This is hot off the griddle. I came home last night. I was telling my partner Colleen about this. I started by volunteering and have begun doing a bit more work at a local treatment center here in Orange County. And it's evolved from a year and a half ago, when I was completely closeted about my addiction as well as my own trajectory in psychology, which I'll say a word about, to now that in the last weeks and months, I'm involved in in-service training with clinical staff. These are licensed people, and I tell them, not only am I an addict in recovery, but I lost my license as a clinical psychologist owing to the wreckage from addiction, and that I've been operating these years as a recovery coach as a function of that. And in fact, even in this last year, the Board of Psychology wouldn't readmit me to psychology because I hadn't been sober long enough, and that, in their words, I knew that addiction was bad, and I did it anyway. It's like wow. And so I have to tell you this story. As I was leaving the treatment center last night, there are two doctoral level psychologists that said, "Dr. Bob, would you say a word more about your license?" Because I began being out about this, and it's really in the spirit of freeing up conversation, not just with clients, but also with staff. And so I told them the story a little bit more detail, what I shared with you all, but that's the basic upshot of it. And these are both people that once they complete their postdoctoral internships will apply for licensure. And their response to this story was, first of all, good for you, Bob, because we value you in terms of what you bring, in terms of firsthand experience of addiction from the inside, but also, decades of having been a clinical psychologist. And the upshot was shame on the Board of Psychology for not being as enlightened as the medical boards are, the nursing boards, the National Bar. Most every other discipline, ironically, other than psychology, has more forgiveness towards addiction. Yeah. And this isn't a rant against psychology. It's just an acknowledgement that we live in a society and a culture that is still moving out of the dark ages in terms of stigmatizing, marginalizing the addict. And John, I'm saying all of this to embrace what you just started by saying. I want to be one of those that I want to out myself. And I'm doing that with purpose. One of my primary, in fact, I believe for me, my primary barrier to sustaining any kind of successful recovery was and still could be internalized stigma, which is shame. Is when I internalize the stigma that comes from society or from my professional association and begin looking at myself through those eyes, that's shame by any other name. And I want to do all I can for myself because I'm committed to my own recovery, but also to offer this to others, and not just clients, but also professionals in the field. So the book that I'm writing, as you guys are both aware of, really goes deeply into this, where I'm looking at the culture of treatment professionals and how there can be a subtle stigmatization that goes on even within those that are treating addiction. And there's not an addict that I work with that doesn't know what that feels like in treatment. So in the spirit of, I really want to be naming ourselves in an honoring way, and I have great respect for the anonymity of the 12-step programs. I continue to be involved in them. At the same time, I feel an ethical responsibility for myself to responsibly get out there the reality of addiction and the genuine hope for recovery and rehabilitation. So I'll toss that in support of you, dear John.
No, and when you were saying this, it made me want to weep, Bob, because we've had conversations about that, how painful that was for you, and the fact that you can just look clear-eyed and just face up to that, and and just say it to everyone. It's really moving. Really appreciate your courage.
I looked at the two. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I looked at these two that asked me the question yesterday. Zach and Honey are these two clinicians, and I said, I'm not, and I never have, including to the board, pretended innocence. There's nothing graceful or beautiful about active addiction, and so I've been open with the board about that. I was open with them about that. This is no pointing fingers and blaming others. It's about learning to own our pain, our guilt, our shortcomings, and do that in a way that doesn't shame the shit out of us and paralyze us in our recovery. Yeah. And I'm a crusader for that, John. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you. You've always, I remember the first time that we met face to face, you've always been a loving, broad embraced container for me in my recovery. And I bow to you and to Pam for that. And you too, Doug, because we're in the soup together. So thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody here listening to this are, here in the Three Musketeers, as we call ourselves, we've all been broken, man.
Yeah.
Like that's part of it. And we all, it seems, anyway.
Yeah. When I ask clients in the treatment center, what's it like to work with clinicians that aren't in recovery? their response is just what you said, John. For example, if I'm a client working with you, John, you don't literally have to be in addiction recovery to be in recovering your life from depression or suffering of whatever kind, and you've been open about that. It's that I see in you. If I'm your client, I'll see whether this man or this woman knows suffering and has found some way to not give up hope. That's what I want from you. You don't need to be an addict. If I'm a schizophrenic, you don't have to be a schizophrenic, but you sure better know craziness. You sure better know suffering and darkness if you're going to work with me. And that's absolutely the pearl of great price in this work, it seems to me.
Yeah.
Hope is so critical to everything. I was reading something that came through my inbox just this morning, telling of a research study where this is a horrible animal research story. So, please be mindful if you're squeamish. But what happens is they wanted to measure how long a rat would keep trying to swim before it drowned. And they put it in, and it lasted about 15 minutes before it died. Now, they did another experiment where they took the rats out immediately before they hit that threshold and gave up. They dried them off, they warmed them up, and then they put them back in the water. And instead of going for 15 minutes, the rats were able to keep this up for 60 hours. We're talking about 15 minutes to 60 hours because they had a taste of hope. Hope keeps us going when things seem too hard to go on.
That's incredible. Wow. So it speaks volumes.
I really appreciate your perspective on shame and stigmatization with this. I have told this story before, and we'll probably tell it again too, but I came to a personal decision too between the time when we had conceived of this podcast and the first time we recorded, when it hit me that I was going to be going public with this. Yeah. And for the exact reasons that you said, transcending that shame and stigmatization is something that I want to be a part of. And we do that through not pretending that it's an acceptable place to be in, but understanding that everybody goes through it and there is hope and there is relief and there's nothing to be ashamed of in having suffered from addiction, as long as we are taking the steps to move ourselves forward and to heal. And being publicly open about what we have gone through is, I think, important for others to hear because it gives them hope and it gets it out of the shadows so that things like groups like the Board of Psychology can see it differently, begin to see it differently, so that our culture can begin to see it differently, so that we begin to see ourselves differently and can do the work that's needed.
And there's two parts of that. I mean, there's the outside stuff, is all the stuff, getting back to gay people, I mean, my God, it's not okay. And now it's like, I think millennials are pretty much over it. It's like, oh, he's gay. So what? It's like, he's Scotch-Irish. Oh man, wow. And, but I remember a lot of the people who, pioneers who kind of went, well-known people, celebrities that came out, I mean, it's 10 years ago, 15 years ago, really. And I was always very heroic, thing to come out and just admit it, and then we can get on with it, And
I have to tell you guys a story. My next older brother, Alan, was only ever gay. And we grew up in rural Texas and then relocated to rural California. So Alan grew up through high school having to be completely closeted always. I mean, completely private about his sexual orientation. And no sooner did he graduate from high school in Central California than he went immediately to UC Berkeley and began there. And this was in the late 60s. Alan was one of the early activists in what was then called the gay liberation movement. And I still have a photo on the cover of what was called the Berkeley Barb. It was the local rag up there. And there's a picture of Alan holding up a placard, and it was really in the very early days of this. And so I have such pride in hearing what you say, John, in terms of the evolution. This has been almost 50 years now, but there's no comparison. And so Alan would have been lynched if he had come out where I grew up with his sexual orientation. And he's continued to live in Berkeley all these years, for 50 years now. But to realize that these causes, we can make a difference in them. And Alan's done that. I have to tell you, Alan, it makes a difference for me. doing what I'm doing right now. And Doug, when I listen to you as a brother in the same circumstances, I completely bow to what you just said. I feel like this is how we'll usher in a new era, is doing what Alan did starting in the late 60s, is putting it out there, opening it up. It's the single greatest benefit in my experience of working the program, whatever 12-step programs, is that you're in a program where every week you come in or every day you come in and you need to confess deepest, darkest, ugliest stuff imaginable. And I don't know about you guys, but I was not wired for that. Not wired for sound with that at all.
Not at all.
Speaking of closeted, and have to practice those muscles. And thank goodness for the program, because it's given me the fortitude and the strength now to want to bring this out more publicly, just as I shared with you guys. The healing will be in exposing the wound to the air, it seems like to me, not in keeping it secreted away in a moist, infectious environment. So that's hope for me.
Yeah, my big story was, I joined this religious group when I was 14 till about 22, and it turned out to be a really toxic, awful cult, and I just didn't talk about it for years. I mean, I had good friends, we were blah, 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 and I would just never mention it. It wasn't until I was in grad school studying to be a therapist that we had the JFK, the idea was you had to do some work on yourself if you're going to do work on other people, which is pretty, good idea, I think. And so I had to start coming out about that. And, but that was just something I felt so, it's just not something I wanted to talk about.
And it's not a choice that we can make for anybody else either. And it's not something, it's a very personal and can be a very difficult thing, and everybody has different circumstances. And so, certainly the way you handle that in your own life is for you to decide, and no one else. We have made this choice in a particular way for particular reasons, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right move for everyone at this time. It's something that you really need to check in with yourself and your circumstances and your heart and your intentions, and make sure that if you're doing it, it is for the right reasons and will be a net good to the world.
Right.
Agreed. Thank you, Doug.
Jesus said, allegedly, in the King James translation, which is suspect but beautiful language, Jesus said, don't cast your pearls before swine unless they turn and rend you. In other words, it's not always appropriate, if you're in the neo-Nazi biker bar up in, Idaho or something. So, and by the way, I'm gay, it's like, man, you just ought to keep that with people, that are a little more open.
I'm chuckling, John, because I was thinking of that exact passage as Doug was talking. That's so crazy to me.
Yeah.
We now share a brain, John, you and I.
No, I mean, Jesus in the story, sometimes he start talking to people and they start trying to throw him off cliffs or stone him or something. He'd have to, he said he passed through the middle of them. I have this linebacker, I think. He's throwing everybody out of the way and getting out of there. So obviously you have to be discreet, and you don't just share your deepest self with anybody. You have to be people.
There's a time and a place. There's a time and a place. In fact, Doug, earlier when you were talking about our Facebook group and it being a secret Facebook group, what evolved in that direction, and you all will remember, is we had somebody who'd been listening to our podcast that was interested in joining the Facebook group, and I can't remember the technical term of what it was in his prior incarnation, but you could at least access it online through a search, right? So whatever the format was, and this person said, I don't want to join a group like that because still people could find some way to discover that. And for this person, it was extremely non-propitious to be out with being in recovery. Totally understand it, totally respect it. Doug, you moved in immediately and moved it to the next level of kind of firewall so that it's completely secret. This is exactly why we did it, to respect the fact that for some people, it's like back to the biker bar image. For some people, it would be absolutely fatal professionally, for example, to be open and transparent about the recovery. May there come a day, but we're not at that point now at all, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's, change in the military. I was in the Army, and we had gay people in the Army, just like you have gay people everywhere else. And when I was in basic, and then we went basic and MP school, it was like a 4-month process. We had 2 guys in our unit. I'm calling my gay people now. But anyway, black guy and a white guy, they were so gay. So obviously gay, it wasn't covered up. And we didn't give a shit. They were our guys, and they were good soldiers, and that was it. Bam, end of story. Whatever they wanted to do on their time. And this was like 1979. So this whole thing that gay people in the Army, the world would collapse or something so stupid. But anyway, but let's get back to what we were talking about. And the other time to share, like you guys, like hopefully I have some too, is when it's in the service of your community. You know, you share your speaker. You know, you don't share to hear yourself talk or something. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you've got to say it to another human being and be heard. As with a sponsor in AA, it's a really brilliant, or with a therapist or coach or some, you know, a good friend. Sometimes we just have to talk about our stuff, you know, because the saying in recovery, you're only sick as our secrets. At some point, you just have to share it with another human being, and you have to get it out there. So when it's out, you can get another perspective. And by the way, you're not the biggest, you know, creep in the world. I mean, we've all done things that we're not proud of. And if you think you have, and you have any, you know, time in adulthood, I don't know. You probably have some kind of mental disorder, right? You know, nobody's perfect. We all, you know, we all make mistakes. So
there's healing power in looking at your stuff, whether you're speaking it out loud to another human being, a group of people in our Facebook group, for example, or a therapist, or talking out loud to yourself, writing in a journal, whatever it is you do, you look at it externally instead of going through it, and it takes the power away from those events, those beliefs, those things that are pushing you in a negative direction. It disempowers the shadow when you look at it in that way. And so speaking your truth matters.
Yeah, and you know, talking about PTSD, one of the, I don't know, I probably borrowed this or got it, but my own work of myself, my own traumas, you know, in the beginning, this stuff comes on when you remember this thing that happened, the event that caused it, or it could be, you know, just growing up in a certain household, not one event, but a whole just time frame that causes PTSD. But when you remember it in the beginning, it's like you're in a virtual reality, surround sound, vibrating chair, and it's just like it's so real. You know, it's just there. You're being re-traumatized. You're re-experiencing it. And with time and work, where we process this stuff through our psyches and through our bodies somatically, and do the work we'll talk about, I'm sure, as these series unfolds, then it becomes like a black and white picture. You know, you can take it and stick it back in the file or in the picture book. It's still there, you remember it, but it no longer has that powerful, painful charge that can just, you know, freak you out and get you trying to numb yourself or kill yourself or hate yourself, or however we play that out. And the same thing with these, you know, shame. It's another form of PTSD, you know, this stuff, and we have to process it, you know, and then we did some bad stuff and we have to go clean up our messes. Geez, I have to do that daily. I mean, not in a huge way, but, you know, it's just like moment to moment. And, you know, I learned that when I was a wilderness guide with young people, leading them up and down the mountains and through the deserts. When you screw up, you just own it. Hey, I'm sorry, guys. I was sorry, I got pissed, you know, and it's like, oh, you know, it's like, you know, you can say you're sorry and you can clean it up and do what you can do. And it's just healthy, you know, just makes us connect and be more human.
It's really important to remember that too, because there is a danger in holding yourself to perfectionist standards of perfect action and perfect behavior, and that can be a trap that's, well, not equally terrible, but certainly pretty bad. It will help. It will keep you stuck. It will, you know, cause all kinds of relapse and trauma and self condemnation when you fail to live up to impossible standards. And so realizing that it will happen and mistakes will be made allows you to move forward courageously in whatever imperfect way and correct as you go. Which
I just had a thought. I'm sorry, Doug. Please continue.
Sorry. Oh, I was just concluding. That's exactly what you do in practice, no matter what practice you're doing, is you observe, reflect, continue, and correct. So
I just had this thought. It's the first time it's come to me as I was listening to you talk about perfection, Doug, is that, and it reminds me, John, of our conversations about playing tennis, and all three of us are musicians, is that my involvement in refuge recovery, which is you know, a Buddhist mindfulness approach to recovery, very meaningful to me, is that the language of refuge recovery, which is really rooted in Buddhist language, refers to skillful speech, skillful actions, skillful this, skillful that. And I've never thought of it this way before, that what if being skillful with my speech or with my behavior includes, part of the skill of that is recognizing my fallibility. And so it doesn't say perfect speech, it says skillful speech. Well, what would that be? It would be what you said, John, is that when I step on your toes or you mine, we have the whatever it takes to apologize. Now that's skill. That's skill to be able to own my imperfection. As a tennis player, skill to risk slamming your forehand down the sideline and then missing it some portion of the time. Skill would be giving grace to yourself for having gone for it and even missed it. Mm-hmm. For me as a drummer, to risk putting something into a measure that doesn't quite work. Okay, note to self, Bob, don't do that again. Is that any less skill than only staying within the lines and never risking creativity?
You know, and I was reading that oftentimes child prodigies never really continue that into adulthood because they get in this comfort zone where everybody honors them. They're all special when they're kids. Mm-hmm. And so they want to stay there. So they really don't run with it, you know, and it's, you know, and it's a screw ups that, you know, and blah, 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 and finally get it together later in life and have a, you know, a better foundation and much more realistic foundation of, you know, who I am and acceptance, the perfectness of the imperfection. And that's just the story, you know.
It's that willingness to take risks and step outside our comfort zones that leads to growth. And that's no matter what dimension of practice we're talking about, whether it's, you know, in the weight room lifting a little bit more weight than you think you can do, or running for 1 extra minute, or Bob playing a measure that you don't know if you can play, or playing a tempo that's 2 clicks of the metronome faster than you think you can do it. Whether it's meditation, whatever your meditation practice may be, if you expect perfection with meditation practice, for example,
you're going to quit.
You're going to quit, and
exactly.
It's a significant obstacle for a lot of folks too, which is why we say you gently bring it back over and over and over again, because that's exactly what trains the skill. That's why it's a practice, and that's how we grow. Meditation is particularly wonderful because that bringing it back over and over again when we slip over and over again allows us to accept that in other areas of our lives and continue to challenge ourselves in the right ways to continue our growth.
And one teacher, meditation teacher, told me it's the return that's the practice. You know, and it's like, you know, it's doing the curl. It's the actual movement. It's like, here I am, I'm doing my centering meditation, and the Red Sox really did finally win a World Series. What? You know, you know, and it's like, and the guy across the street, he's a professor of cinema, and he's never seen Stand By Me with where does it come from? Coming back, and the practice is coming back. You know,
I like that.
Yeah,
you know, they say in psychotherapy training that the key as a psychotherapist is not to get it perfect, it's to repair the ruptures. And it's really to keep bringing it back. So when I miss a tune to a client and miss by a millisecond or a millimeter, the aim is to repair that. And as you guys know in your own experience, it's the repair that builds the strength. Getting it perfect, if that were even possible, doesn't build anything. It's pushing it out there. So it's actually risking making an error, and then repairing it, that actually builds the greater healing. I love this imagery.
So it's with music too. You know, I mean, if you're going to play really hot lead guitar, you're going to make mistakes, man. I've heard Clapton make mistakes, and then you just, you know, you make it right, and it's just that's just life. It's just the way it goes. You know?
I remember hearing of Michael Brecker, the late great jazz saxophonist, giving a lecture to a group of jazz students, and he was going to play a piece of music, and he says, "I'm gonna play this thing. I'm gonna screw it up just to show you what doesn't work." And so he kept playing this standard. Let's say it's Body and Soul. And every time that he would purposefully make a mistake, he would reflexively tie it into the song or into the solo again. After 3 or 4 attempts of this, he looked at the group. I had a friend who was in this group who told me this story. He looked at the group and kind of threw his hands up and said, "You know what? Come to think of it, I don't know if I know how to make a mistake." And what he meant by that is that there wasn't any even purposeful deviation from the key or from the note or whatever that was required that he couldn't wind back in. And that's what he did. He was so congenitally wired to do that. He could not do that.
There you go. Yeah. You just keep making music.
Saying yes, and like they teach in improv, you know, there's not a mistake. You just go with it.
Very good. Thank you.
Oh, that's
I like
great.
that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, well, let me just say a little bit about practice, integral practice, and and I'm always trying to simplify these things. And if you like meditate 40 minutes a day, you should work out like a nutcase. I mean, really pushing yourself to your 10, not the whole time, but during that, 40 minutes a day. I probably need a little more than most people because I'm a little more screwed up than most, I think. But about an hour, 10 minutes of meditation, it's really good for me. And then I do like today at an hour and 55 minutes preparation for this, and once a week to have a really kind of deeper, a 2 hour or 2.5 hour, whatever you can handle. And and I'm using this eye wake technologies in my meditation too, so it's binaural stuff that's very, very powerful and keeps me in the zone. But yeah, you got to get this, and it's had a lot of time and it's a lot of commitment and everything. Yes, but after you've done it for a while, it's like you can't go back. You're so much better. You're so much more vital. You're so much more happy. You're so much deeper. You could deal with the pain and suffering in such more, healthy, mature way where it actually becomes a teacher's and not a executioner's, bloody axe or something like that. And there's no, once you've crossed that, that whatever that line is, it's very, very hard to go back and just go unconscious and let your body go to hell and let your interiors go to sleep.
John, you remind me of something by your last point, that the founding author of this idea of flow was Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. It's a mouthful, and we're not even going to try to spell that last name. Just there are no vowels in it, I can assure you. It's just all consonants. Anyway, look up Flow, his book on optimal experience. And one of the things he says that's characteristic of floating, you just put your finger on it, he says it's autotelic. And what he means by that, auto means self, telic means end, is that it becomes an end in and of itself. And so for you, the meditation, you don't have to have some kind of external motivation to do it. The process itself pays for itself. The same for me in my morning meditations. I look forward every morning. I'll wake up crusty, there's no doubt about it. But once I get going, I am so grateful to be in that space, and I don't have to have some external electric prod to remind me to do it. It pays for itself in huge dividends. And so it's autotelic. It's an end in and of itself. I'm not doing it for any purpose, not doing it to impress anybody. I want to do it because it's there and how it feels.
And it's also a yes and, like Doug was saying, and it's how you serve the world.
Yes.
You got to tune the instrument. You got to sharpen the sword. You got to sharpen the blade.
Yeah. I continue to be so grateful, John and Doug. I continue to be so grateful because this practice leads inevitably to my serving, like you're saying, serving the world. And how lucky am I that what I enjoy doing most, which is centered around this interior practice, ties exactly into my mission in terms of the world. They're not separable. The one feeds the other. And how lucky could a person be is the thing that I enjoy doing most in the outer world is exactly served in direct proportion to what I do in the inner world and vice versa. Isn't that crazy?
It's wonderful. It's called coherence, I think.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
So you may think that you don't have time, but these things fill you up too and allow you to give back. During my addiction, I had stopped playing the guitar. Things got really bad. I put my instrument down. I sold my saxophone. I didn't pick up my guitar for years. And there's a lot more to the reasons why, but fairly recently in my sobriety, I was expecting my daughter. My wife was pregnant, and I recalled suddenly these thoughts I had of always wanting to have a child growing up in a musical household. And I went one day and I dug my guitar out of the closet. This is probably 2 years ago now, having not touched it for so long, and just picked it up and started to play again. But it was different this time. There was no pain attached to it. There was no self-blame. There was no regret of making what I thought were the wrong choices of major in school there was no expectation of being some great guitarist. I just picked it up to play for no other reason than I wanted to, and I thought it would be fun.
That's
and
right.
It has been one of the most rewarding things in my life to have that back every day. And those, when I can get myself to take a break and spend 30 or 60 minutes playing the guitar, that's not wasted time, because it gives me so much energy and so much joy back to bring to the rest of my work. I always come back and do better work after I played guitar for a while. And it's absolutely worth it.
And so many of us got discouraged when we tried to make music a business, but when you say it's a yoga, man, it's prayer, it's how we join with the divine, the union with the divine. That's what music is, and if anything else comes in, well, that's in God's hand. I'm going to play,
I've had this experience. You both really inspired over the years. Most of my career, I've been a teacher. That's most of what I've done, teaching and speaking. And secondly, I've played a lot of drums. I've played a lot of music. And I started noticing some connection. This is probably 20, 25 years ago, and it's only ever been the case. And I think, if anything, it's at the highest fever pitch ever right now. You inspired me by this, Doug, when you're talking about the experience for you of picking up the guitar. When I drum, this will be a self-evident to you guys because I'm preaching to the choir here. When I drum, my teaching directly reflects the creativity of the drumming, and so I can feel it the next day after I drum for an evening. I go teach, and it's like, wow, it's amazing to me what comes through. And vice versa, because the two are both creative acts for me, is that when I teach and pour myself into it, I should say let myself go into flow in my teaching, and I drum that night, you can bet your bottom dollar that the drumming will be inspired by that. So it's just to realize the reciprocal relationship. So whatever it is you do in your waking life, let's say for occupation and so on, to have it serve and be served by the creative, the art form that you embrace, whether it's gardening, dance, cooking mindfully, playing guitar, playing drums, they're absolutely reciprocally intertwined. And I felt that over the years. It's really stunning to me. I wish there were a way to measure it from the outside. I can guarantee you from the inside, I can definitely feel the difference.
Bob, I think we should lean into and explore that in our next episode too, but that's a really good preview. I think flow practices carry over into the rest of our life. Whatever your flow practice may be carries over into the rest of your work.
That's it right there. That's great. Yeah. We shall.
Well, cool. Maybe that's a good place to wrap it. And anyway, thanks everybody. And hey, Dr. Roger Wall said spiritual growth happens one body length at a time. So just accept it, bless it, and deal with it, and you'll grow. So anyway, we'll see you next time, and thanks for showing up. And contact us if we can support you anyway. Get on our secret Facebook thing. I'm not even sure how to do that, except I'm already on it, and I get to read it all.
IndoRecoveryInstitute.com/community.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. This is great.
God bless everybody. Thank you.
All right.